So I got a couple minutes before the kids get home with the wife, so let's see if I can make this video real quick. All right, welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. We all know what happens to this guy. Bah, 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 bah. So Franz Ferdinand is the spark that sets off World War I, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, I should say. And yeah, it's ironic. I mentioned in the last video that he was honestly, to an extent, an ally of the Serbs, was willing to give some more autonomy. Anyway, he ends up getting shot. This is the spark that sets off World War I. It sets fire to the long-term causes we talked about in the last video here. And again, more evidence that the nationalist aspect here, the nationalism, ends up causing World War I. This assassination by Slavic nationalist terrorists here. So it's pretty interesting, pretty terrible, pretty sad. Him and his wife Sophie were both killed. This is an interesting photo. I like this picture a lot. It's in color, and I mean, back when I was in school, we never saw stuff like this in color, and to see it in color nowadays is just what a blessing. I mean, wow. Also, check out this plumage. Why do we not dress like this anymore? What happened to us? What happened? What happened? Anyway, so I like this a lot. You've provoked a gang war. I love this meme. It's funny, but more importantly, it actually summarizes this topic. I mean, in a couple different ways. The assassination is the spark that starts a war, but not just a normal war. It's a gang war. All right. Remember, the alliance system is basically what allows for this war to become a massive world war. All right. So, teachers, please take note. Memes are not just goofy memes. All right. They can be used as tools to help students understand things that they may not otherwise remember. When you laugh about something, it really does help you remember things. So please take note. And then there's this meme here. And then you have some that are just for comic relief. Although tanks did occur, they did start coming out during World War I. So anyway, moving on. Oh yeah, I like to just take a moment here and talk about. I mean, I used to not like World War I when I was a kid. I just thought it was kind of boring. You have no man's land. Everybody's running back and forth and getting slaughtered. There's no like crazy decisive engagements. It's not very dynamic, like World War II is. But as an adult, there's just so much interesting, weird things about World War I. There's modern technology. What we could call modern technology here. You see the standardized parts here, right? You see the steel, the machine guns, right? But there's also carrier pigeons. And I mean, it's a really incredibly interesting war. So to help students who are trying to study, remember World War I has to do with trench warfare. Trenches define this war. This war basically hits these lines here, and these lines basically pretty much stay stagnant throughout the entire war. They move a little bit back and forth, but generally speaking, these lines don't really change too much. And it's because of the advent of all of this cool technology that these countries have been building up for years leading up to this. Again, the militarism coming into play here. The focus on new military inventions, new technologies here. We see machine guns, we see poison gas masks in this photograph here. And previously, if you had hundreds and hundreds of men, and it was up to skills, like who was the best shots, who could hold formation better, who could do the better fighting. But now you can have very, frankly, poorly trained, if trained at all, men, just barely trained enough to man this machine gun, able to hold off dozens, if not hundreds, of other men. So this is what creates the horror of World War I, is this intersection of new technology meeting these like old style tactics of like, just go march, just go fight. And there's just this inability to sort of, break those stalemates because the tactics weren't very good. It's not like they had much of a choice either. I mean, this war, once this war got set up, there wasn't a whole lot anybody could do about moving those lines. This picture is really cool. I mean, zooming in here, this is basically one of the only photographs I've been able to find of troops charging at the camera during World War I. So I thought this was really cool to look at. it's like target practice. I mean, you can see why the death tolls were so high. You have like 1 or 2 machine guns, these dudes would be dead in a minute. So, and those Maxim guns in those previous photos, I mean, they work great. They're still used nowadays in Ukraine, so it's pretty remarkable. They don't make them like that anymore. So here you can see why, again, why did the war stay a stalemate for so long? These trenches weren't just like a trench in the sand and that was it. You had layers of trenches. You had trenches above primary trenches. You had pillboxes looking down here so that even if the enemy got in here, they couldn't really get past this without taking out this pillbox. Barbed wire. I mean, you have your artillery. Hopefully your artillery is like boom, 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 softening everybody up. But even if they are, you can see that they had dugouts. So, I mean, you could hide a bunch of troops in there, a little bit of luck. Most would survive an artillery barrage and be able to come out and fight the enemy when they come. Aircraft don't really make a huge, like, turning point sort of role in this war. But they were useful in terms of intelligence collection, reconnaissance. Hey, there's a bunch of guys over here. It looks like they're going to get ready to push in this direction. So that's another thing that prevented really the element of surprise of being able to poke a hole and really force that hole through. Very broad, wide open spaces, wide open front lines here, especially after the artillery gets rid of all the trees. And if you do get to the front lines, you do have this guy waiting for you here. So you make it to the trench, and it's filled with enemy soldiers. They're armed to the teeth. They had sawtooth bayonets in some cases so that the saw would rip out the guts of somebody that they had stabbed. You have the grenade here. I mean, just pretty awful war. And when we talk about awful, it gets even worse. I mean, why does the air taste like this? You got poison gas. This is such a barbaric weapon. It was used to pretty decent effectiveness. Again, never really ends up creating this turning point. There's no side gets a swift and clear victory because of poison gas, outside of a few examples where they do gain some territory, right? But nothing like turns the tide of the war here. But in terms of death, there's no shortage of death. And then here's a meme about Oswick. It's old, but it checks out. If you haven't seen my memes about the Oswick gas attack, check out my Instagram, please. There's one with cats. I think it's pretty funny. So, looking at this, you can see that the effect of artillery on the landscape. They'll put pictures like this on DBQs. They'll put pictures like this on the EOC test, and they'll ask you questions about it. All right. First thing, always try to look and see if there's some sort of caption. It says "No Man's Land" here. Once a forest in Flanders Field. This is World War I, right? Any reference you see to no man's land, you need to make sure you understand that this is World War I. It's a great way to make sure you keep things in chronological order, and also helps you remember things in the future when you study for these sorts of exams. No man's land. I mean, imagine being told, guys, the enemy's over there somewhere, go get them. No thanks. More pictures. Just really stunning photography here. This is a fun picture. I like this picture a lot. This is not, don't worry, it's not really a dead horse. That would be crazy. Not surprising, but still crazy. This is actually a paper mache horse that these guys built to sort of hide a sniper in. So the dude is shooting out of, I assume, the butt or the tummy of this dead fake horse. Pretty interesting, right? So you got to get creative sometimes to try to get an angle. Hey students, why is the bathroom so smoky between classes? Anyway, moving on. This is another picture. I've seen this picture on EOCs before. You need to understand that this picture, and there's paintings that are very similar to this, these are gas attack victims. All right, you can tell. I mean, the only way you can tell is because of their symptoms. Their eyes are covered, right? They can't see. There must be some fluid coming out of their eyes, or their eyes give them pain. They can't see, and they're all holding on to each other so they don't get lost. It's really tragic stuff. And then look at, they even try to protect their donkeys. How nice. I love that. So, what is life in the trenches like? So at this point when I'm teaching, I stop and I say, what do you guys think? And all students, even students who are like hard on themselves. They think they have no understanding of history. They know that it's not good. And remember, if you're having trouble remembering the details of events or anything, just simplify it. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Or is it a complex thing, right? And so by simplifying things like that, it'll help you remember themes, events, and concepts. So generally, the kids understand that it is bad. Even in modern terminology, when you say like, "Yo, I came from the trenches," like the trenches aren't a good place. You came from there, and now you're in a better spot, right? So here you go. Really interesting imagery. This guy's definitely not happy. This guy's kind of maybe shell shocked. Some of them are smiling, probably because they think their moms will see the picture one day. So if you live in the trenches, it's not a nice place. It's not a it's not a 5-star hotel. You dig the trench, you stay there. You have to hold your positions. You get rotated out sometimes, but generally it's just not easy living at all. These were terrible living conditions, as opposed to the generals who had wonderful living conditions, generally speaking, unintended. I play this game with this picture. I say, how many soldiers can you see here? So if you want to play the game, pause it. You might be surprised at how many soldiers you find sleeping in this picture here. Now this is weird, right? It's one of those guys. No, I'm just kidding. This is an officer here who's inspecting the feet of his soldiers, making sure that they're clean, making sure that they're not getting something. Trigger warning, by the way. I'm about to show some nasty stuff here. Making sure their feet don't look like this. This is a terrible case of trench foot. Change your socks. If you don't change your socks, you don't take care of your personal hygiene. Don't give your feet some air sometimes. This is what'll happen. It is awful. It's disgusting. Just another example here. Another example here of how awful the trenches are. Does anybody remember elementary school? Yeah, I bet you do. At least one of you watching remembers getting lice. Not good. So lice were a problem in the trenches. And not only that, if you did have food, you had to worry about rats. All right, so here you can see, I think these are some French soldiers, but you can see that this young pup here, this terrier, was able to capture all of these rats. What a good boy. So everybody's pretty pleased with this here. I think they're actually going to eat them or use their hides for something. I've seen plenty of footage of people tanning rat hides to patch uniforms with and stuff like that. They were pretty desperate for supplies, especially the Germans towards the end of the war. Enjoy this meat. So, all right. So, another aspect that is really important to understand when looking at World War One is the nature of the war in Europe and the effects of the blockade on Europe. So, England, big navy. In the last video, we looked at how their production outpaced German production, naval production. So on land, you had this stalemate. At sea, England used their superior naval power to work on starving the enemy out using a blockade. These blockades are effective. You can see them in all warfare. Whenever there's boats, if you can blockade and surround the enemy and starve your enemy out, you're going to try. All right. In terms of U.S. history and APUS history, the American Civil War, the Anaconda Plan there, this plan here is very similar to that. And by comparing those two and discussing those two on a paper that has something to do with those topics, you could get a bonus point for continuity themes and potentially change themes. So this is a picture of British vessels here. It's sort of an exercise, but this is something of what maybe the blockade may have looked like in some parts here. Because of the blockades and because of their lack of typical surface vessels, the Germans began to very effectively utilize U-boats. Guess what the U stands for? Underwater. They're underwater boats. Boom. Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing naming skills there. This is sort of just a cross-section of what it may have looked like. Here's some of the younger ones here. This is what a modern submarine looks like. Very interesting. I love this stuff. Looking at vessels, how they work. It's just very incredible stuff to me. This picture is cool. We're going to come back and talk about it later. But I do want to note the U-boat has surfaced here, and they're looking to help these crew members. But we'll talk about that in a second. Airplanes. I love airplanes. Do you like airplanes? That's too bad. They don't really play a major role in World War One, although there's some crazy pilots in World War One. You could talk about the Red Baron, the Lafayette Escadrille in France. There in the American Volunteers there. There's a lot of cool stories about airplanes, but in terms of like the war itself, they don't really change the course of anything. They do not cause any turning points. Just know that they existed. They were used in World War One. It was an innovation in warfare. It was one of the new technologies that they used. But again, it doesn't really change the course of the war. Ka-chow! I am speed. So getting back to this stuff, war in Europe goes on for a long time. It goes on for about 3 years before the U.S. enters the war. It's a stalemate. So why did we stay out? How did the U.S. get involved? And that's what we're going to talk about next is how did the United States get involved in World War One? So one of the reasons we stayed out or tried to stay out was because of our historical legacy in terms of our geography and our isolationism is we had this desire to be separate. We wanted to stay out. It's a European problem. Why should we send American boys to die in a place that we cannot pronounce, right? So this is a theme throughout most of U.S. history here, this theme of isolationism, this theme of trying to stay separate from European affairs. So let's define isolationism here real quick. It's what a lot of people should do. They should stay out of people's business, right? Anyway, in terms of politics and policy, it's a policy of staying out of people's affairs, especially international affairs, focusing on your domestic affairs, having a weaker foreign policy, a less aggressive foreign policy. Although there are limitations to our isolationism in the 20s, right? There's the Naval Conference, the Washington Naval Conference. There's the Kellogg-Briand Pact. But generally speaking, we try very hard to stay apart from European politics and affairs, especially the alliance system that was coming up during that time period. And it's because we look to the men from our past and we want to emulate them. We want to sort of, well, to an extent, we want to emulate them because in his farewell address, we wanted to stay apart. He encouraged us to stay isolated from the affairs of Europeans. Washington also said, hey, don't make political parties, but I'm not going to get into that in this video here. We also felt no need to be involved. At the time, it did seem like specifically a European issue outside of some economic hiccups. It wasn't really hurting us too much. Physically, we were safe. We had an ocean on either side of us. We had Canada to the north. We got the Mexicans to the south. We didn't really have any danger at the time. And Wilson runs his next campaign on neutrality. So he gets reelected with the promise of neutrality. And I think that's pretty funny because he gets us into the war, right? Obviously, it's not just his choice. There's this issue of public opinion pushing him, but we're going to get into that in a moment. So looking at specific reasons why we got involved. One is the fact that there were some German atrocities, right? But then also the propaganda just blew those atrocities out of proportion and really cultivated this atmosphere of distrust of Germans, this need to get involved to protect our allies. So one of the first examples of this is something I wish Neville Chamberlain would have noticed in the 30s when dealing with Adolf Hitler, is that the Germans dismissed the Belgian claims of neutrality and their neutrality agreement as just a piece of paper. So Neville Chamberlain was around during this time. Anyway, I could roast that man all day. I'm not going to, though. So anyway, Belgium's not at war. We'll look at a map in a second. But Germany used Belgian territory to get around the main lines that the French had established to try to get to Paris quicker. But when the Germans get into Belgium, they encounter resistance. There's evidence of them shooting civilians without trial. They blew up public buildings, apartment complexes, right, churches, cultural centers, and England declares war at this point. So here is a good map. You can see that Paris is here. The target of all campaigns are, and this is to be clear, there's not really a lot of rules of engagement at the time. It's seen as not good to go after civilians, right? But here you see this, we need to get to Paris. If we take Paris, the rest of France will surrender. And you can see that this is where the engagements really began, right? So then you have this over here. They're trying to push through Belgium to get to Paris quicker. And you can see they got really close. So that's just really impressive there. And so because of, again, there were some atrocities, right? There's always atrocities in war. But the propaganda machines really took this to a whole nother level, right? There's some really ominous subtext here in this art piece here. The old man's dead, the woman's begging, the man is clearly helpless, about to be shot, and his wife is in the background. Not pretty pictures, not pretty pictures at all. And of course, in classic media, American yellow journalism fashion, the newspapers capitalize on this. They sort of, they take these stories, they blow them out of proportion, they repeat them over and over and over again. They change some of the names, they print them again. They told some really crazy stories. Some degree of truth in some of the stories, yeah, sure, absolutely. But the scale, a little bit exaggerated. And of course, to go along with many of these media pieces, there were art pieces, right, to help you bring this along. So I have seen this one over here on an EOC before, which was, I thought that was like just crazy that they put that on there. But it's why I talk so much about this now, is because I didn't talk about it my first year teaching. I didn't think they would, and they asked a couple of questions about it, and I was like, well, I guess I'm teaching this from now on. So this is one of the main reasons why the U.S. gets involved. And you can see here that even in the New York Tribune, and the fact that they're capitalizing on, reports of rape, reports of just absolute horrors going on in Belgium. I mean, look at this. It's a day-to-day record of the Germans' drive through Belgium, a narrative of fact, thrilling, dramatic, true. Start reading it today, daily and Sunday, and the New York Tribune. Oh boy, more man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. And then here you have another image here. You can see the German eagle, just like it was on the previous hand there, just dragging through Belgium. You see the church being destroyed here, clear symbolism, because there were churches that were destroyed by artillery barrages. And here you can see what seems to be some sort of an apartment complex building just totally destroyed due to the indiscriminate bombing. So another reason why we decided to side with the side we did is most Americans at the time could really trace their roots back to England. We both, England and America, we speak English generally. There's strong connections there. There's cultural connections. There's religious connections, right? With the Protestant aspect there. There's also this aspect of, democracy. So, the U.S., Great Britain, and France, not Russia, right? But most of the allies were democracies, and that's pretty interesting topic there. Another reason the Americans sided with that is, look, we blocked out Germany, so guess what? We only heard the Allied perspective about everything. I'm moving on here because I think my kids are going to get home soon. So trade dropped to nothing. We lent a ton of money to the Allies too. The banks gave a ton of money to the Allies. We were making bank trading with them. So if we give a loan to somebody and they lose, we're going to lose all that money. So there's also this additional financial aspect to siding with the Allies. Bank, bank, bank. Political cartoon to analyze. If you're a student, please take a moment to pause this, look at the image, describe in your own words what you see, talk about the context of this, and what is the sort of who is Jack Frost, who does he represent, why is that important, blah blah blah. Okay. So I'm going to end off with this here. The blockade is so successful that plenty of innocent people died as well. So the Germans used their advantage, right? They had U-boats. I'm going to go quickly here. Most Americans knew that, hey, we probably shouldn't travel over there, but if you did, they told you not to half the time. For the Lusitania, they warned people not to go. They went anyway. Americans get more involved, right? So this is again one of the final reasons we get involved. So the Sussex here, there's this brief Sussex pledge. There is this brief Sussex pledge where they say, hey, we're gonna not attack, right? We're gonna warn them. We're gonna rescue survivors. There's that image again. This is of the Sussex pledge, but it's brief because as we know, we go to war. So here's a quick timeline for you. To wrap up, I'm going to talk about the Zimmerman telegram real quick. Again, just as a reminder, we were trying to stay out. We didn't really want to get involved. So then this happened. The British intercept this telegram from the Germans that was basically asking Germany was asking Mexico, like, hey, if we go to war with the Americans, we'll help you get those territories back. And we asked the Germans, like, yo, is this real? And they said yes. They didn't even try to lie. So I thought that was funny. That's why he's like, what's up with it? I just think that's funny. Like, they didn't even try to lie about it. So Zimmerman telegram. Hope if you want to, you can pause and look at the cartoon. But essentially, they basically promised to help Mexico get back lost territories if they help out with the fighting the Americans. So I think it's pretty funny. Americans were very mad. Let's just put it that way. It did not make anybody happy. All right. And in between the last slide and this one, my family's come home. So everybody say hi, Robert.
Hi,
Robert. So Americans were not happy about the Zimmerman telegram. And so within that same month, Germany thought it would be a great idea to go after a bunch of unarmed American merchant ships, which is a good strategy. They're going after their enemy's supplies. But anyway, due to this, the need to protect the international ability to ship over the seas, protecting democracy, going against these German atrocities, and of course protecting the interest of the elites of the United States, we have declared war in April 1917 against the Central Powers. So that's it. That's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it helps you learn something. And I hope it helps you remember the reasons why we got involved in World War I, as well as the overall, what was World War I like. So anyway, very broad overview, I know, but I hope it helps students. And anyway, have a great day, everybody. Be good. Don't do anything you can't tell grandma.